Hey, I'm Dr. John Azar-Dickens with Enforce Health, and I'm here with Coach Jay. Our topic today is going to be police training, or specifically, what kind of training should a police officer do for the type of requirement for the job? In other words, if for the kind of job a police officer does, with what's required of them, what would be a good training program for them to be involved in? And one of the questions often specifically more about running. Should, police officers' job involves a lot of slow downtime, sitting in a vehicle for extended periods of time, going from sitting to then perhaps sprinting. And if there's a pursuit, for example, a foot pursuit, it's usually not, they're not going to be chasing somebody for 3 or 4 miles. It's going to usually be a number of feet or yards, and it's going to be high intensity. And if there's a fight, then it's going to be, you're going from nothing to suddenly high intensity. Yeah. So how do you train for that? What is the best way? Those things to think about.
I've got a couple questions just to understand the training a little bit better.
Okay.
So how many times a week or how often is there a chance of chasing someone? And I know you've said before it depends on where you work in the area.
Right.
Well, are we talking once a week, once a month?
Well, I think there's always a chance. I mean, there's a 100% chance anytime. And depending on, again, it goes where you are. If you're in a bigger city and your crime rate is higher, you have more calls for service, you're going to be busier, and there's a higher likelihood you're going to get involved in something like that. Smaller town, less volume of calls, less opportunity. The thing is, and the challenge for law enforcement is they have to always be prepared and always be ready, because it could come up, it could happen. So if I'm an officer and I want to just be fit, I'm not looking to run marathons, I'm not looking to become a runner, but I want to be prepared for if I have to fight or if I have to chase. How do I train for that so that I can be prepared to ramp that up quickly?
And the other question is, I'm guessing we want to tell everyone something that's going to be transferable no matter what your age range is.
Correct.
Like, you want something that you can do whether you're a 22-year-old just on the force, or if you're 50 and you've been working for 20 years. Right. I think the most important thing to realize is the foundation of everything that you're going to do, sprinting, fighting, is going to be your endurance. So I think you do, and it doesn't necessarily have to be running. It could be cycling, it could be jump roping, it could be something like CrossFit endurance, or swimming. Like, there's lots of great opportunities with endurance, but I think you want to have a foundation.
But let's keep
and you want to do it regularly.
Right, but just to say, let's keep strength training out of it, because let's just assume that a person's already lifting weights or has some sort of strength training routine. Let's just assume that, because what I'm more interested in, I think, for this topic is endurance, cardiovascular endurance, and being prepared to go from 0 to 100.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking is I would take the police officer and give them a base level of fitness that they're going to try and accomplish every week. And that would be something like, I'm going to swim 3 times a week for half an hour, or run, or bike, or something like that. And then twice a week, I would insert some type of higher intensity activity. And I would do it on a gradual progression. So, for example, if someone was going to bike, and that was going to be their main form of exercise, then I would say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I want you to bike 30 to 45 minutes at a moderate to easy pace. So you're out there, you're moving. And then Tuesday, Thursday, we're going to bike for 45 minutes, but we're going to throw in some 30-second to 1-minute intense bursts where you're practicing a similar level of intensity. And I would even do some visualization in terms of, like, hey, I'm chasing somebody. What do I do? Like, whatever training you guys go through it in your head.
Right.
While you're doing that intensity level. And then I also would try to balance, if you're doing strength training already, I would try to couple that with, your 30 to 45 minute exercise that's more endurance based. And then I'd go do a really intense 5 minutes of lifting, because I'm assuming, how long does a fight last?
Well, it just depends. It can be variable.
Can it last, like, what's your max and min time?
There's no such thing. I mean, it could be something that, you don't want it to last very long. You want it in the fight and be done with it. But there are some people who, you're going to struggle for a while. We're talking minutes. And also a lot depends on your backup, how quick your backup gets
Right.
there, all
Right.
that kind of stuff. Where
So
I am,
are we talking under 10 minutes?
oh yeah, gosh. Yeah,
Then I think that setup is great, where you have some endurance exercise on the front end, and you're already slightly fatigued, and then you're going to the weight room and hitting some higher intensity stuff at the end. Because in that scenario, let's say, like, I'm always trying to focus on specificity. If I am chasing somebody down and I've chased them for 2 minutes or 3 minutes and then I have to fight them, well, I'm going to have a hard time getting exactly that intensity in training, but I can get a little bit lower than that intensity. I can lengthen out. Instead of chasing them for 2 minutes, I can be tired from the 45 and then go into the weight room for 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah, so you're pairing the two. You could maybe run or cycle for X amount of time and then go in and do weights and do some heavy to give that feel of the same kind of movements.
And really the best scenario would be to actually practice fighting with someone after you've gone for your run to grapple with someone. Right. If I'm training someone for an endurance event, I'm trying to get it as specific as possible to the event they're trying to do. So, if you and I are police officers and we've got a place to work out, then I'd say let's go for a run. And then obviously we're not going to hurt each other.
Do defensive tactics.
But we would do defensive tactics immediately after when we're both tired. And I would try to do it to exhaustion.
Yeah, we call it. It's often called scenario-based training, and that's ideal. That is the ideal way to train. But in let's say that we don't have that opportunity.
You're not going to have it every week.
Or if we don't have a department or a situation where we do regular defensive tactics, what could I do on my own to prepare? And I'm really more interested in the cardiovascular side of it.
Yeah.
So actually, a lot of people you'll read that you shouldn't pair cardio with lifting, but in fact, in this case, it's probably not a bad idea.
No, it's great because you're training for something that's specific.
Yeah.
And my thought always is in competition, which this is competition. You want to be fitter than whoever you're battling.
Right.
And in order to do so, you've got to think, okay, I've got to train harder as a police officer in this specific realm than the criminals are going to be training and smarter.
Yeah.
And the other reason I mentioned a progressive way is you don't want to get hurt in your training. You don't want to go out there just nutso and run 100 sprints and then go to work so tired and hurt.
Right.
That's why I'm recommending a kind of shorter period of training. And if you know you're going to have a long day and there's a higher potential, like if you have an off day, man, if your off day, make that your harder day. Like, don't do an hour running or cycling or swimming. Go to the weight room, work out 30 minutes, and then go for a 12-hour shift. To me, that's not very smart either because you're going to be at a deficit when you start.
Right.
If that was the scenario, 12-hour shift, I would do a 20-minute exercise and I'd do 10 minutes of lifting or something like that.
So either shorten it and make your more intense days on the days you're off.
On the days you're off, because then you're not going to be just dead tired starting the day out.
So the specific, another question is, a lot of people think that long distance running is of value. My opinion is the only time long distance running is of value is if you're going to be a long distance runner and you're going to train for a marathon.
Then you're back to specificity.
Right. So, but is there any benefit for long distance running for someone in this position with this job? We talked about this a little bit before, the idea that, over 3 or 4 miles, unless you're going to be running some sort of race or you're training for it, you're really not benefiting yourself too much cardiovascular wise.
I will say this, if you already were a runner, and now you're a police officer, or you're a police officer and somehow you've gotten into it as a sport, as something that you enjoy doing, it's not going to be a disadvantage for you to have such a powerful cardiovascular system, because you're going to recover quicker in that grappling scenario.
Right.
You're going to tire out later. You're going to be able to think better when you're tired. But I wouldn't say, if you're starting out as a police officer,
or don't want to be tied up doing long distance runs.
Right. It's not something.
Necessary.
It's not something that I think is absolutely necessary to get the job done. Again, back to specificity. You want to be able to fight, to grapple when you're fatigued, But that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be at the cardiovascular level to run 13 miles.
All right, so let's be very specific about the exercise prescription. It would be, we're not interested in being long distance runners, marathon runners. We want to be fit for the job, fit for the duty that we're doing. So it would be three low to moderate pace runs or bikes or swims or what have you, and then maybe 1 or 2 higher intensity.
I would try to do 2 high intensity sessions.
And that means just involving throwing in some strides,
Yes.
maybe in a run, or just doing straight out interval kind of training,
Yeah.
like going to a track and training sprints.
I would try to do it twice.
Okay.
And or doing some low rest weightlifting, where you're going one set to the next set to the next set to the next set.
Okay, with no rest,
with
so
almost
supersetting.
no rest, supersetting. Okay. And the reason I say twice is it takes 6 weeks to really adapt to any stimulus. So if you're just starting out, man, it's going to take you 6 weeks to really adapt to it. And if you're only doing it once a week, I feel like that 6 weeks gets even longer to adapt. You need that second one somewhere in there to kind of get you adapting quicker.
Okay, and we're also assuming this is somebody who already has some fitness. If we're talking about somebody who's overweight, has not been exercising at all in years,
then they probably need to start walking.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, absolutely.
And doing the same thing in the walk, a slow to moderate walk, and then maybe even trying to almost speed walk a couple times and up that heart rate.
Yeah, what you would do then is you would take your walking slow to walking fast ratio, and you would start with a complete slow walk, and eventually you'd transition to a 2-to-1 slow walk, fast walk ratio, and then you'd get to a 1-to-1, so you'd be like a minute slow walk, a minute fast walk, and then eventually you'd switch it to where you had a minute slow walk, 2 minutes fast walk, and then you follow that same progression into running.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
Just
Very
mix
good.
those ratios. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.